All right, hello everybody. Welcome to another installment of Unbiased America Live, the greatest liberty show on the internet, coming to a TV station near you soon. I actually just made that up. We have a special guest with us today, Julia Erynn, who is a journalist at the Alpha News, which is it's also on the web, right? Right, Julia?
Yeah, it's alphanewsmn.com.
Okay, and former Miss Minneapolis. The other boring panelists we have back are Kevin Ryan, who is Grandpa Unbiased America. He's the creator, and he looks like a grandpa, so that's why I call him that. And Matt Palumbo, who is 13, and he's currently attending his last year of college. There's a lot to get to today. Of course, I want to focus on our guest for a little while. Julia, from Miss Minneapolis to journalism, did you was it something you focused on in college? Was it something you always wanted to do? What got you into journalism?
I was actually a political science major, and so journalism was not really on my radar. And then I won Miss Minneapolis, and I spent the whole year. I was featured in a documentary. I was on camera quite a bit, and a lot of people told me, this is something you should really be doing. And I like to listen to advice, and it was, I think, the week that I decided I was going to start trying to make a reel and going to start trying to sending it out to stations. I was asked to come consider this Alpha News gig, and I got it, and I've been learning kind of on the job, but it's been very, very fun, and I've learned, I'm assuming, more in 6 months than I could have in 4 years of a journalism degree.
Okay, so you were a political science major, and then from there you've always been somewhat to pick political science, you had to be interested in current events and politics, correct?
Yeah, kind of interesting. I was pre-med at first, and they said, you need something to stand out, and I was kind of interested in politics, so I got an internship with actually a Democratic Minnesota governor, and I knew nothing about politics, and I interned for Governor Dayton for a little bit, and then I thought, okay, let's check out the other side of the aisle, and so I interned with the Senate Republicans in Minnesota. And then from there, I kind of got more involved with other affiliations and groups, and then I worked for the Leadership Institute and Turning Point USA, and then eventually left that position because I got the Alpha News gig.
Okay, and does Alpha News cover just Minnesota, or do you do national issues too?
Well, for the most part, we cover the Minnesota State Legislature, but I've spent the last week in Iowa interviewing a number of the presidential candidates, so we do cover national stories, especially when the candidates will be coming to Minnesota or Iowa or somewhere nearby.
Oh, okay, that's really great. So you went to Iowa, and did you interview Trump? Everyone's going to want to know. Everyone wants to talk about Trump. That's it. Trump, Trump, Trump. Did you get to
So
interview?
Donald Trump actually didn't speak and didn't have a speaking engagement, but he did fly around the fair a few times in his helicopter and then just walk up and down and cause a big scene. So no, we didn't actually interview him. We interviewed Rick Santorum, Ben Carson,
I saw those.
yep, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and I think someone else that I'm forgetting.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. Who can
There's a
remember?
lot. It was a blurry week, especially because it was very hot and you were running around a lot, and so it's kind of a one big blur at this point.
I probably would have missed some of the candidates because I would have been eating all that food everybody talks about. It makes me so hungry whenever I watch these things when they talk about the food. I'd probably miss a candidate. But I've eaten one of those, what do they love, the deep fried bananas or something with the bacon
Focus,
wrap.
Will. Focus.
All right, sorry. Yeah, see where I'm already getting off topic here because we're talking about food. What is the objective of Alpha News? I mean, what is your modus operandi per se? Is it? I mean, I don't know if I'm necessarily asking your political persuasion, but it seems you've covered Planned Parenthood quite a bit. Is that because a lot the mainstream media, certainly at the national level, hasn't really covered much of it? Is that happening too in Minnesota?
Yeah, I saw the local stations' reports of Planned Parenthood protests when they first happened. This was the second round that happened last week. But the first round, they essentially were 30-second bites of a bunch of people who saw highly edited footage gathered outside Planned Parenthood. And that was it. That was all that they covered. And so Alpha News has kind of two niches. One, our saying is your news first. And we don't mean we're putting it up first. We mean you, the taxpayers, it is your news that we're covering first. So we'll cover if they're spending outrageous amounts of money, if they're doing projects that just don't even make sense and they're funneling a ton of money into. We'll cover things like that, and we'll cover what the elected officials are doing and saying around Minnesota. And I don't think a single news site in Minnesota really looks that closely at the state representatives. And most of America pays attention to the national candidates, not necessarily the state and local ones. And that's where I think a lot of little sneaky pieces of legislation get through that probably shouldn't be. And so we'll cover things like that. And then our other niche is that if the mainstream media isn't looking at something, that kind of tells us something. And so then we'll start diving deeper into those subjects.
Okay, so would it be accurate to say you're a watchdog for both the local government and the media?
Not necessarily like watching media in the sense that we'll like call them out on something.
You fill the gaps. You fill
yeah.
the gaps that they're not covering, and then you're what? I mean, obviously, I don't know the political persuasion of Minnesota, but it seems as though there might be a lot of government waste there, and that they may not report on it.
Yeah, that would be very accurate to say.
Okay. Your personal political persuasion, before we move forward, would you say you're more libertarian, you're more conservative, you're more left-leaning? I hate to put people in certain categories, but it's always good to nail down.
Yeah, I guess you could say I've spent a lot of my time affiliating with the Libertarian Party. I've emceed one of their events and one of their conventions, and have spoken at a number of their things. But I get along with all groups who advocate for smaller government and reducing the waste that government creates, as well as personal freedoms and liberties. So I'll speak at a Tea Party event, and I'll go speak at things like that. But for the most part, I lean pretty libertarian.
Okay, so let's get into the first issue, which is Planned Parenthood, which is an interesting issue. These videos, I think there's been 7 videos that have come out now. I think the last one has been I mean, they're all pretty horrific, but the last one's pretty bad when they're discussing transporting a baby with their eyes open, and the gal with these glib comments about it, and the gal saying make sure its eyes are closed, you know, and laughing again over lunch. It's really hard, kind of hard to watch. A lot of libertarians, and certainly those on the left, would say it's a woman's right to have an abortion. Do you see this as a moral atrocity? Do you see this as a place where government should intervene, per se? I'm not even talking about defending Planned Parenthood, but insofar as protecting life.
Well, I've always wished that there was a third category. It's always pro-choice or pro-life, and I wish there was a third category for people like that hold my beliefs. I believe that I personally would never get an abortion. I think it's a horrible thing. But I also know that making it illegal means that women will be doing it anyways. Like many things that have become illegal, it becomes a black market because people were going to do what people want to do. So it should be safe and legal. At the same time, though, they don't let you regulate abortion clinics. They make all these crazy demands, like you can have a ultrasound if they're trying to get a special kind of abortion so they can get certain parts, but you can't have an ultrasound beforehand, et cetera, if you're doing it for other reasons. And with that being said, I also think that they should include in that people who don't think any funding should go to abortions. Let them be legal and safe, but don't put my money towards a cause I don't believe in. And so there really isn't a category for people like that.
Okay, let me get down the panel here. Kevin, I know you've seen some of these videos. It's funny the retort to these videos, people saying that they're not real, they're doctored, even though the entire video is posted online. I mean, I post these on my social sites. I get that all the time. The same question that I directed at Julia. Do you think government has an obligation? I mean, it says basically the whole promulgation of government from the view of Bastiat is that life, liberty, and property exists. Therefore, that's the entire purpose of government, and government exists because of it. So do you think that government has an obligation to protect life at all stages?
Well, I mean, you're talking about one of the issues that has divided people forever. I mean, when does life start? So that's, I mean, what Republicans, at least, and the people who've essentially said that, okay, abortion is settled law, but they're not in favor of it. I think what they've settled on doing is trying to stop abortion after a certain amount of weeks. But
let's look at it from a philosophical perspective. I don't necessarily care about public discourse here. Looking at it from a purely philosophical perspective, does government have an obligation to protect life at all stages, irrespective of the political divide and the subjectification of truth per se.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, you don't think they have an obligation to protect?
I mean, you're making it into a very big area here. What about? I mean, of course they do. Suicide is an issue. Some people believe we should have the right to commit suicide. Others believe we should be stopped somehow from committing suicide. You have people getting old and so forth. Is the government going to keep them alive and spend taxpayer money to keep them alive for an extra, 10 days at a cost of $100,000? I mean, there's a lot of issues that come up. Now,
so that leads to my next question then.
Okay.
At what point does government have an obligation to protect life?
Well, that's a good question, because I was about to say the deal with abortion is the people being aborted, so-called people, can't protect themselves. And that's become a big argument, of course, is that when does the government is supposed to step in is when you can't protect yourself, when you can't help yourself. And you would think that the people in the womb, the unborn babies, fit that category perfectly. And of course, so that's what people are saying. And it's a hard thing to argue against. I mean, but the point is, you've got people saying, I'm a woman, it's my body. And you've got other people saying, well, that's a fetus. I mean, it's a very difficult issue. I don't even like the issue of abortion, to be honest, because I think it takes away from some much more important issues. I understand the emotions behind it, but I think we've put way too much into the abortion debate, and we end up, in a lot of times, we make our voting decisions based solely on whether or not somebody's pro or against abortion.
Okay, Matt, I don't know your views on abortion. I'll direct the same question to you. I'll move forward. At what stage does government have an obligation? At what stage of life? I mean, it's scientifically proven that life does begin at conception. You can look at the purpose of that fetus, whatever word terminology that they do want to use, that it is a human life. At what point does government or any third party have an obligation to protect it? Is it merely a matter of time? Go ahead.
I don't know. I guess in terms of the legality of abortion, my position would be somewhat closer to Julia's. I'm against it personally, but politically I realize there are unintended consequences with any law, really. And one of the unintended consequences of illegal abortion would be people getting them on the black market, which we know is a lot more dangerous than it would be illegal. So I think the focus then should be, well, what's the best way to combat abortion? And I mean, I think anywhere you go, the evidence always seems to be, more sex education and greater availability of birth control. So it's hard to say. Like in terms of the Planned Parenthood videos, I think a lot of people are calling for defunding, but you have to realize a lot of the money that's going towards Planned Parenthood is paying for birth control, so that would reduce the number of abortions. So I think it has to be, maybe regulation on what the money to Planned Parenthood can go to, but I'm not for cutting off all funding.
Okay, let's look at it from the perspective of we're willing to compromise on life. We're willing to say, oh, well, enough people say it's a woman's body, we can kill an unborn baby at this certain time. But rarely are libertarians willing to compromise on property rights. Well, we can expropriate this property, or we can just expropriate it a little bit. Or we can control it through regulations, and we can, you know what I mean? There's calls to everything's abolish everything until it gets to the protection of life. Is that a valid point?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just a practicality issue. I just don't think it's practical to enforce, a complete ban on abortion. Just as impossible to focus or to enforce a complete ban on drugs. It doesn't pan out in reality as we would hope it would.
Is it possible to enforce a complete ban on theft? Should we not, because we can't control all thefts, should we not outlaw some or outlaw it at all?
I feel like it's a different. That's an interesting question, actually. Fuck.
Yeah, well, I mean, these things that they take a little bit of, they take some thought. I mean, is it too absolutist to claim that? I mean, let's go ahead.
Well, to come back to that, I guess there's no unintended consequences really of laws against theft. There are unintended consequences for laws against abortion, which is women dying as a result of a botched abortion, or I guess that is a big one.
But there are intended consequences of abortion, like unborn babies dying. Let's look. Let me move on. Let me move on. Julia, is it too absolutist to think that way? That all life is precious, therefore government should protect all life. or I mean, is it really something? I mean, I can understand why people are unwilling to compromise on this. At what point do you compromise human life? I could see that. I could also see compromising. I mean, is it too absolutist to say one? It's funny because libertarians are very absolutist in the market, yet not extremely absolutist when it comes to human life. I mean, life, liberty, and property. The father of classical liberalism, John Locke, explained these. Who I don't know why we give up so much on one and hold true to the others. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I guess I see it as the government shouldn't be like telling people that they can't do something, but at the same time, I believe in personal responsibility. So you should know what you're going to be doing. So I'm okay with clinics wanting to try to instruct women to do something else. Let's take a look at that heartbeat, stuff like that, taking preventative measures and to educate. I think, and to tell them the psychological effects too that's going to happen after the fact. That's pretty much outlawed from clinics being able to tell women the consequences of their actions. I believe as a libertarian, people are adults. We shouldn't be telling them what they can and cannot do, but they should be fully educated and allowed to be fully educated on the consequences of their decisions.
Right. Okay, that's an interesting discussion. We can come back to it perhaps a little later, but it's really hard to do a show today without talking about the shooting that happened, forgive me, Virginia, yes, and the immediate cries for gun control. First of all, I don't know, did you see that video, Julia?
I did. I spent a good portion of my morning just in tears watching those videos. It's so sad, and as someone who spends time around candidates and in intense situations, I'll be going to a protest on Saturday, covering that. It hits home. It's very realistic, and it's very disheartening to see that it's being used for propaganda for gun control.
Right. I mean, I saw the video, and that was really, really rough to watch. I couldn't believe it was really like you couldn't believe it. It was hard to. I watched it one time. There's no way I could watch that ever again. I mean, it's like seared into my mind how terrible. You see the cameraman fall. I mean, you don't even want to talk about it. It's hard to describe. But here, I mean, I think it was literally, Kevin, you would know this. You posted about it. I woke up and I found it on Unbiased America. I mean, seconds into it, they're already talking about gun control. It seems that everything is used for a political narrative. And again, we're getting to a point where the truth necessarily doesn't matter. It's whether you can use it for political purposes. The Black Lives Matter is hashtag Black Lives Matter only when their political narrative can be created. I think I posted a couple of weeks ago, a little 9-year-old girl was killed, and a black girl was killed in Ferguson, and no one cared. But they're out there rioting against this Michael Brown, who was trying to kill a police officer and was shot. What is you study the media to a degree? Can you explain that to me? I'm lost on that.
I do. I mean, I think that the media has an agenda, not as a whole, but I think individually, people in the media tend to be left-wing, and left-wing people tend to be anti-guns. And I think when they see a potential to push their narrative, they push their narrative. And I think there's way too much. There's way too much. I think basically it boils down to, I think it's time we stop. If you really want to solve the problem, I think it's time to stop focusing on how we kill each other and start focusing on why we kill each other. Because it's.
Do you think they want to stop the problem, though? I mean, it seems they foam at the mouth for these things.
That's the one. It's not that I think they want the problem to keep going on.
Right.
I believe that. I mean, I truly believe that they think that the solution is fewer guns. But I've done some study on this, and if you take a look at countries that have much stricter gun control regulations, and I'm not talking about socialist areas of Europe and so forth. I'm talking more about some violent areas. There's a lot of crime and violence and murders that have nothing to do with firearms. And in fact, if you actually do a regression and you take a look at the numbers, having more access to firearms in your country seems to lead to less, not necessarily lead to, because I know the whole problem with actually making a conclusion that something is directly related, but countries that have more firearms have fewer murders. And I mean, you would think that with such a gigantic media in the United States, somebody would take a look at the numbers and finally say, you know what, maybe there's a different reason that people are killing each other in America, and that maybe it's not because guns are available.
Well, then get to Maddie. I'll move on to Matt with this one. I mean, if it's not guns, then it's race. I mean, if you look at this crime, and I'll get to Julia on this in a second. I'll be interested to ask. If you look at race, I mean, this guy was racially motivated. I mean, I think he carved the names of the victims in his bullets. He shot, two white people, a young blonde reporter and the cameraman. I don't know. I think that's what he said. It was the Charleston shooting that was his tipping point. Do you think this will be, first, one, give us a little gun statistics and tell us, I know that you've written extensively on this, that guns aren't the problem. So, and then answer do you think this should be a hate crime? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to start with the gun stats. You can look at, Chicago, D.C., the UK, Australia, really anywhere where there's gun laws or gun control put into effect, you see a spike in crime, overall homicide afterwards. There's actually a great book on it called More Guns, Less Crime by John Lott. It's based on studies he's done on gun control over different counties in the U.S., and a lot of its research has been replicated, so it's very reliable. Secondly, I really don't think it's going to be painted as a racial issue because racism is only a problem when it's the other way around, apparently. So.
Okay, Julia, do you think?
But, I mean,
go ahead, Maddie. Go finish up. Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to tie this into gun control, and the interesting thing is there's hundreds of thousands of people who die every day, and it's the few who die in a unique or rare way that make the news. And those are the ones people remember and want to craft policy around. It's not the majority of ways people die, it's the minority.
Like today, I mean, the big deal was that this guy shot a reporter on air. And I mean, here he is, he has his phone and he's recording it, and then he posts it to social media. I mean, you have to be a real lunatic to do that. I mean, you have to be a real lunatic. Go ahead.
If it was just like a news story where it's, let's just say, a headline out of Florida, a man kills 2 people, no one would care. No politician would talk about it or try to drum up sympathy. It's because we have the video, we see how horrific it is. People get emotional, so they can exploit that. I think it's disgusting.
Julia, I mean, based on the evidence we have now, it seems that it was racially motivated. Who knows what comes out? I don't know. Maybe this is some manifesto that he faxed into some I think it was ABC. I don't know if the fax went to ABC or they just turned over his 23-page manifesto, but it seems as though this is racially motivated, that he's made these claims in the past, almost as if he was seeking victimhood. And then he attacks these 2 people on air. This is obviously all staged. I don't know, clearly this is like this reporter wanting to do his last story. You know what I mean? If I was a psychologist, that's the conclusion I would come to. Do you think that? I mean, look, I'm against. I think the whole notion of a hate crime is stupid. I think it's politicized. It does nothing. I mean, who does it? Who commits a crime like this out of pure love? Do you think that race will come into this at all, as if it was the other way around?
Yeah, I definitely think race is going to come into this, and it's a factor. I don't necessarily think that it was 100% motivated by race. I think it's a lot like, well, when I was Miss Minneapolis, I was all about suicide prevention, and one of the things we tell people, the families left behind, when someone has a mental breakdown like that is, what's in the suicide note, it's not necessarily accurate. This person's not mentally healthy, so don't take it, word for word. And the same is to be said with his manifesto. It's a mental breakdown. I don't necessarily think it should be taken 100% seriously, what he said, and that it's somebody who needed help and didn't get it, and it should be chalked up to that, a tragedy. I
totally agree. And the Charleston shooter, the same thing. I mean, when the Charleston shooter was painted as, whites are racist, I mean, the president at one point said racism's in our DNA. I mean, the guy's obviously a kook. This guy is clearly a kook. I mean, to what extent I don't think race had anything to do with it. The man's a loon job. But I mean, it's like, again, back to political narratives. It's, if this was a white kid and it was 2 political reporters, this is racism. I mean, look, you had the guy in Baltimore come out today and tweet. I don't even know his name. He's an activist there, okay, like a political activist, saying that, this stuff will end once white supremacy ends. As if this reporter woke up and said, gee, how can I be a white supremacist today? You know what I mean? So it's like there's these people that have to inject this into it, and it's not just some kook that lost his mind, and that it's like they want to blame broader society. Would you agree with that, Julia?
Yeah, I think it's a lot like, what I said, like taking somebody's suicide note and being like, oh my gosh, it's all my fault, versus saying, this person wasn't mentally healthy. That's what it should be. It'd be like, this was in a suicide note, but let's not use this as an opportunity to force more legislation upon people. And I think that's what it's going to unfortunately be taken as with a lot of the media.
You think there's going to be a push at the federal level for gun laws? And if there is, do you think any will be successful?
Oh gosh, I guess it depends on what happens in the upcoming elections. I don't know if it's going to happen recently. I'm sure a few more. I think we're going to be covering more and more tragedies and talking about gun control until eventually the public starts crying out for it. Whether or not that'll come to fruition is anybody's guess.
Okay, yeah, I mean, this has happened in the past. I mean, there have been calls for gun control, and it's largely failed.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think it will. But Kevin, would you agree with me that, again, not even the media, but the intelligentsia largely portrays this, that everything has to do with race, that if it was the other way around, that if this is a kooky white guy that shot up again, like a black church, it's racism, but when a black guy does it in the name of racism, who's an absolute kook, it's not a hate crime. But the white kid that did it, it's a hate crime.
Yeah, I have numbers that I've been meaning to put onto UA that are pretty politically not correct about race, crime amongst the races, and there's a gigantic, I mean, it's not even close. There's way more black on white and black on black violence than there is white on black violence, but it doesn't fit the narrative. And, I don't mean to say that some violence is good and some is bad. I'm just saying the majority of murders doesn't fit the narrative. Right. And therefore, it gets ignored. Like I said earlier, if there's a reporter and he sees that his agenda is something fits into his agenda, he's going to push it. If it doesn't,
who does the narrative help, and who's
going to ignore it?
Who does the narrative help as opposed to who does it hurt most?
Right. I mean,
who's it hurting? It's hurting the black community the most, and who does it help? The left, the leftist.
Well,
right?
I think the bigger issue is this entire issue of murder in America is so overblown. I mean, I have some numbers here. 99.4% of all deaths in America are not caused by murder, all right? 0.6% are murder. And just to bring it to a little bit further, of the murders in America, 99.8% are just plain old murders. Only 0.2% are mass murders. And yet, it's the mass murders, which are this tiny, tiny, tiny problem that are taking up so much of the narrative. Like I go back to the issue with abortion. There are certain things that I believe are getting too much time in the public discourse. This one is humongous. I mean, if you want to concentrate on murder, look at all murders. Don't just look at a certain set of murders. Don't just look at racial murder, of white on black or whatever. What about the inner city murders? I mean, those take up a lot more actual body bags than anything that white on black crime does. Let's look at everything.
Right. I think it was Sowell that pointed out at one time that, and the riots in Ferguson will attest to this, that I think if you got rid of all the homicides from the cops from cops killing black people, if you got rid of all of them, it wouldn't lower the homicide rate for black on black crime 1%. I mean, this is what they focus on. It's like these kids are dying. There's children dying in Chicago at an alarming rate. I don't hear anybody coming out against that. So I don't know. That loses me. Matt, do you think that this will lead to some sort of gun control in the House or in the Senate or even at the state level? Certainly in Virginia, where Terry McAuliffe is, there might. Go ahead.
Honestly, I think there's zero chance that will happen.
Why?
Well, I mean, honestly, if Sandy Hook didn't cause people to call for gun control or at least get anything meaningful passed, I really don't think any other mass shooting will. So I don't think that's a concern. The idiots who want to make this, or who pan any white on black crime or homicide as like a race issue, as evidence of systemic racism. I mean, I think Gavin McInnes tweeted the other day, if you're black living in a black neighborhood, you're something like 12 times more likely to be killed than if you're black living in a white neighborhood. So, if we're in such a racist society, we should expect that to be flipped.
Mm-hmm. It's really horrible how we have to talk, we have to define people by their skin pigmentation. And again, this is a narrative of the left. It's really contemptible that we have to stoop to this level. I mean, it's really that, again, a narrative created by people who are power hungry that want to take weapons away. Generally, big government statists, really, they're the ones that perpetuate this narrative because it gives them more power. I don't know if you would disagree with that, Julia, but it seems like a lot of these narratives are created and we speak this language and it merely just perpetuates the divide and really balkanizes people. And that's what government really feeds off of. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. We've all seen legislation passed based on emotion and arguments with emotion used rather than statistics and facts. And so, yeah, I agree.
Okay. What are gun laws like, do you know, in Minnesota?
They're fairly strict. I know that most public places you can't have them. You have to take like a class, go to a gun range and jump through a couple other hoops to get your permit to carry. And as far as the more specifics, I'm not sure.
Okay. People can get a conceal and carry permit there?
Actually, Minnesota is an open carry state, so it's referred to as a permit to carry. However, nobody really open carries.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. What is it? What is the? I'm sorry. What city do you live in?
I currently live in a suburb of St. Paul.
What's the size? What's the size of St. Paul in population?
I know the size of Minneapolis is a couple 100,000, and in St. Paul's a bit smaller.
And no one's, yeah, wow, I find it shocking that nobody open carries there.
Yeah, I think the police, I mean, my dad's a sheriff over here, they would stop you immediately.
Really?
So it's
well, yeah,
open carries. Yeah, it's an open carry state, but it's not really an open carry state.
That seems like to be like the stop and frisk policies. In New York, almost. I mean, I don't know if enough. I don't think well, maybe perhaps you should be asked if you have your papers or you have your registration. So I think that makes sense. Kevin, do you think? I mean, let's talk solutions. I think a lot of people rarely ever talk solutions to these things. We say, yeah, the guy's mentally ill, and usually conservatives or libertarians decry the leftist effort to ban guns. What then is a solution to this?
The solution begins with, again, asking why people kill each other instead of asking how they kill each other. And if you actually look at why this guy killed, well, why did this guy do this today? Because one of the things that he mentioned was the Charleston shooting, and as well as some other racial incidents, which, were certainly bad, but it was during a period of time in which racial tensions were being inflamed, frankly, by the national media. And I hate to blame someone other than the shooter, but there was a time span from Ferguson until recently that was completely, you had CNN every single night looking for a murder somewhere in America of a black man by a white man, and just putting it out there like bait on a hook and seeing how much they could incite and looking for those ratings and so forth. So there's no solution to stopping that type of thing. The media is they're going to incite violence no matter what. They're looking for ratings. But in terms of mental illness, yeah, I think there's always people that come out and say afterwards, we had to escort him off of out of the building because he was flying off the handle. And now you've got videos coming out that this guy was in all sorts of altercations in terms of road rage and so forth. So I think there's some issues with this guy that went. I mean, I haven't heard the whole story, but I think there's a lot of mental issues that went unchecked with this guy, and I think there's got to be I think the mental illness factor has got to be looked at closer, because most murder comes down to a mental illness, because you and I are not going to go out and murder someone.
So what do we do with the mentally ill? Do we do it like we used to do in the 70s and put them in an institution? Do we incarcerate them? What do we do?
Well, it's funny because I did some work showing that if you actually include, a lot of people say that that if you look at incarceration rates compared to murder rates, there's no real correlation to them. But if you include incarceration plus the institutionalization rate, then they go up. When one goes up, the murders go down, and when incarcerations
That's interesting.
Whatever go down, murders go up. So if you really want to solve the problem, it's never going to happen. But yeah, I mean, you have to consider that mentally ill people are just as, if not more, of a danger to society than people who are criminals in some cases.
Maddie, you talk statistics a lot about how gun control doesn't work. What will work? I mean, I know that the media could be blowing up a lot of these things, and you're right. This could have happened. This could have happened in other circumstances, and no one would have heard about it. You know, people in the south side of Chicago were shot every day. We don't hear about it. But what can prevent this sort of stuff? Obviously, the problem in the south side of Chicago is different. It's gang violence. The problem of the mentally ill and just these random shootings.
I mean, it's tough to answer because it would be like saying, you know, what can be done to prevent murder? You can't stop them all. It's just some you can target and stop. And it's hard to say. I mean, with the mass shootings, you know, I think you could argue, you know, if more citizens had concealed carry, you could prevent some of these things. But I mean, not in every case. This guy kind of came out of nowhere and started shooting. I don't know if it's something you could prevent.
Okay, Julia, what would be your solution? I mean, I don't know. You know, I'm sure in the streets of the city that you're in, certainly the city I'm in LA, and where I'm from in New York, if you walk around, you do see that there are some crazy people out there that probably need some help, that seem to be neglected. As a libertarian, would you be okay with a lot of these mentally ill people that are, certainly we could start with the people that are on the streets and definitely need help, to be put into some sort of mental institution, and people that are reported and proven to be mentally ill to be put into a mental institution where they can get help, as opposed to harming other people? Do you see that as a violation of their civil rights?
Well, I don't think anybody should be held against their will, but I do think it can be. You can hold a business accountable if they sell a firearm to somebody like that. I also think that, you know, as far as mental health availability, it's severely lacking, and so we can't really talk about what we're going to do with these people and act like they're incurable until we offer the chance for a cure. And stuff like that, and to see what happens. And then I think the second answer is more guns for everyone else. People are far less likely to shoot in places that they know where there's guns. That's why almost all, if not all, shootings happen at gun-free zones. So, you know, if they're looking to not go on a suicide mission, they'll probably reconsider if they know there's probably somebody very close with a firearm.
Right, I would agree with that. I mean, I just don't know how people can't look at the evidence and see, yes, a lot of these shootings are happening in gun-free zones. It seems that perhaps this could be the problem. Yet instead it's like, well, let's ban guns. Or it should be harder to get. It should be harder for law-abiding people. They don't understand that law-abiding people are susceptible to the laws. The criminals will get them regardless. So none of these laws really matter. Just make it easier for law-abiding people to get weapons and defend themselves.
And it makes it easier for politicians to get reelected because people don't understand that.
Right. No, that's true. I'm going to shift gears here. I'm going to get to you, Kevin. I know you've done some work this week. Well, not even this week. I mean, you were talking about markets, and you were talking about, I don't know if it was a month ago or if it was longer ago, I don't remember, but you put out that if we have another recession, or you know, somewhat, it doesn't seem, we've had a tepid recovery, but if we do go into another recession, let's say China and the Fed drag us under at this point, with the correction, asset prices still being held up, and the bubble bursts. What can the Federal Reserve do at this point with near zero interest rates? They can't lower interest rates anymore.
No, it's a humongous issue because in the past, when a recession happens, they lower interest rates several points, and they you know, that's their main weapon, is to get money out there to people. They don't have that available right now. We're at zero. The federal fund, I mean, they're still at zero right now, waiting after all these years. When did the recession start? 2008, 2009? It's 2015. You know, they still haven't started raising rates yet. If and when, and I think we're getting damn close to another recession happening, if that happens, they're not going to be able to lower rates one bit. They will probably, and this is being talked about, sort of floated as a possible way to combat it. They could go back to quantitative easing again. We could be looking at QE4, whatever we're at right now, and you know, if that happens, it's just more sugar, you know, more sugar high into the stock market, and it's just it's just perpetuating this bubble. But yeah, this has been an absolute travesty of central management of the economy. It's just, you know.
Here's a question I have for you.
This is why the Fed has been screwing things up more than they've been helping things.
Right.
Let me put it that way.
I don't know if they've really ever helped anything other than over the past 30 years keeping a stable dollar. But I mean, stability. I think the reason lately the dollar's been stable is because the economy's been so tepid, and the velocity of money has been so poor. Look at the interest rates that we have now. I mean, my next question to you is, why aren't we're seeing easy money, but we're not seeing inflation? And everybody's looking at, they're looking at oil prices as an indicator. Well, these oil prices are under $40 a barrel. The economy's not doing well. Well, why haven't you looked at over the past 6 years the easy money and the lack of inflation we've seen in the economy?
Yeah, well, you hit on it yourself. The velocity of money is at like all-time lows, and it remains at all-time lows. People aren't spending their money. People are not going out there. They don't have the confidence to spend their money. They're not engaging in the market the way they used to. Companies as well are not spending money like they used to.
Do you think a problem, and I'm going to get to Matt, do you think a problem is people think that consumption largely remains the same whether it's in a recession or you're in a recovery or in an economic boom? Consumption really only changes a few percentage points. So really, saving and investment is what bolsters an economy, and people aren't really doing that. With easy money, there's a lot of misallocation of resources as it relates to the price structure. If prices for money are really low, people are going to buy things that they wouldn't normally buy in a natural economy. I don't see any. I mean, I'm watching these business shows. I don't see anybody mentioning this stuff. I saw a few people mention the Fed was propping up asset prices, and there's a bubble at this point that these aren't the natural prices, and that they're working that into the market at this point. Do you think people talk about this stuff enough?
Well, I think they do, but I think the common man, you and I, especially you, probably has no clue what to do about what's happening. Right? I mean, we're in uncharted territory. I mean, we've been flooded with dollars. From quantitative easing to the easy money policies. We're in uncharted territory. We have bubbles all over the place, and when it pops, people are going to get destroyed and people are going to get wealthy. And if I could tell, when and how this was going to resolve itself, I'd be one of those people. But the problem is there's not a lot of people that know exactly what all this tinkering is going to accomplish and how it's going to play out.
Okay. Maddie, do you think that in the market, you studying finances, do you think the market that was a correction, or do you see that as something bigger, that there's a bubble about to burst?
Well, I really don't think there's a bubble about to burst. If you look at historical price-to-earnings ratios and the S&P, I think it's around 16. I think our market was trading before the recent downturn at about 19 times earnings, so it's not too far off the historical average. And if you look at the tech bubble, I think in the Nasdaq I think it was trading at well over 100 times earnings before we saw the tech boom bust. So we're really not trading that high above averages. I think with a correction, or actually I used the word downturn that we saw in the past week, was just because we didn't realize it was. I guess you could say it's a correction, but a correction in response to China, not American policy.
Really? I would actually say it's the other way around. I don't know if it was necessarily a response to China, more so the Federal Reserve, the looming rate increases, and people working in propped up asset prices. From a personal perspective, more so us.
I mean, I think the possibility of rising interest rates have kept stock prices down above what they would otherwise be. But I mean, we've been talking about it for years now, and when you're talking about something for years, it's built into the price by then. I think honestly, if the Fed raised rates tomorrow, it wouldn't change a thing. I think the market's already priced that in.
Really? I don't think so, man. I think if those rates went up even close to a natural rate, I think you'd see the bubble burst.
Yeah, but what happened today? What happened today, right, Maddie, was what you were saying earlier, is that the Fed came out and somebody gave some guidance saying that they're not going to raise rates, and all of a sudden the market's up, what, nearly 600 today?
600, yeah.
Well, it's just because day traders are idiots. I mean, it doesn't really prove a long-term trend.
Julia, what's your view on, I mean, I'm sure it's pretty similar, but your view on macro intervention by government into the economy? I mean, I'm sure you've seen the stock market lately. It's all over the place. In my opinion, it's a correction. I don't know how large of a correction it is, but it is a correction. What do you see from the federal level as the biggest intrusion in our markets and perhaps the most volatile one?
Oh, well, as a libertarian, I, obviously am not very fond of the Federal Reserve. I think it's very ironic that, like, we have the $20 bill the way it is. But with that being said, no, any government intervention in the marketplace, I'm just not really for.
Okay. So do you see what's happening now as a sign of bigger things to come, or do you see it as just a blip, like what Maddie said, just basically a small correction, and that we still have a healthy market?
I don't think it matters. I think that we already know that there's bigger things to come.
Hmm.
That being the student loan bubble, you talked about how saving and investing is a big part of the economy. That's not possible for my generation right now, and I'm
Right.
one of the many paying student loans, and so I know that budget. And so, as far as saving and investing goes, that's going to die. The student loan bubble is going to pop. So whether or not this was a sign, I don't think it matters because we already know things are going to happen anyways.
Well, you brought up a good point. You said our generation, and I mean we've really been hammered. It's like, what do you feel is the most egregious federal policy? They're taking out of your paycheck. I mean, they're taking money from you. It seems that, I mean, we've done work on this. What do you think of Social Security as they take money out of your paycheck that you could probably put away and save, more prudently than the government can to subsidize the wealthiest income class in the country, those people that are 65 and over? Do you feel
Right.
that as being one of the most egregious interventions into your wallet?
Oh, definitely. I believe, taxation is theft. And I think a lot of times people, especially my own friends, I've seen them graduate and all of a sudden they go from a liberal to a fiscal conservative because they get their first paycheck and they're like, what the FICA? And like they are just really confused and they're trying to look into where their money's going. And believe it or not, I was at the Iowa State Fair last week and I heard Senator Sanders speak and he's talking about how he wants to expand Social Security. And I just, had to forehead twat myself. It just, yeah, I think, we're taking so much money out of paychecks that I would be putting into my own charitable expenditures, that I would be putting into my own savings and investments, and my saving for my own retirement, because I believe, why are we using Social Security when you should be saving, your whole life?
Right.
And
But can't government save more prudently than you can, Julia? How do you know what to do with your own money?
oh, because the government solves all of my problems. That's right.
No, I mean, this is really the left. They say, it's there to protect you, and, the government's taking your money and putting it into account for you later in life because apparently either you're unable to do it, or if you're able to do it well, then the money must go to somebody else who is unable to.
Yeah, I didn't ask to be protected.
Right.
What people forget is Social Security was not created as a retirement program. It was old age survivors insurance, and the Social Security age, the rate at which you had to be to claim it, was above the average lifespan when it was enacted.
Right. So essentially, what it was intended to do was fill the government coffers, and they'd have to pay out very little to people that lived past the age of 62 at that time, which was what, the 1935. When Social Security passed. So, and that's exactly what they've done with it until today, isn't that right, Kevin? It goes into a general fund. It's mostly all spent. They do these tricky accounting things where they cook the books, and it's basically a big, huge IOU of which now they're paying out of with a deficit every year.
And they don't have to pay us back if they don't want to. There's no contract. The Supreme Court ruled, I believe it was in 1960 thereabouts, that the Social Security is not a contract. They don't have to pay us. In fact, the money we put into Social Security goes into a totally separate section of the government, is used by the government, and then we get paid separately. So if they decide for any reason whatsoever not to pay us back or to change the amount they're going to pay us back, they can do that whenever they want. In fact, if you look at your Social Security statement, there's a little asterisk on there, and if you follow the asterisk down to the bottom, it says, as of 2041, I believe it said, we will only have enough money to pay 77% of what we promised we'd pay you. Then, a couple years later, if you follow that same asterisk down on your statement to the bottom, it changed. It's changed to, by 2033, we will only have enough to pay you 77% of what you're owed. So little by little, that year is getting closer and closer to actually happening. And when it happens, you're going to see serious fireworks. I mean, people are really going to be BS about this because they've been told this is how they can plan for their retirement. They've been told Social Security will look out for you, and all of a sudden it's not there.
I'll tell you why it'll be solvent is because they're just going to subsidize it on future earnings. Their kids and grandkids, just like they're doing now. I think we'll end up having to pay for us, and I don't know at what point that will become insolvent. But I think that time is coming. I think you said what, 2033?
2033 or 2031, I forget.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know.
If it keeps going down, I mean, if it keeps getting closer at the rate it's been getting lately, by my calculation, by 2022 is when they're going to have to start cutting back on benefits or solve the problem somehow.
And now
they're going to solve the problem by borrowing more, essentially.
Or they're just going to keep running up the debt, and
Yes.
I mean those things are just, when it's tethered to the debt, they'll both accelerate. Both will become insolvent.
Yeah, and the
we have a huge problem with the
today or
dollar.
yesterday saying the debt is once again for like the 100th time in the last 10 years. It's unsustainable. We're on a
Maddie, since you've been 13 years old for the past,
Yes.
I think it's been 10 years, you're really susceptible to this. I mean, you're 21. You just turned 21 in November, and you're going to be working to pay Kevin in about 2 years.
Yes.
Kevin starts to collect Social Security 2 years from now, of which he filed an extension because he was like, I don't want to collect it now. So he filed an extension about 5 years ago when he was 65. And now when he's 72, he'll start to collect, and you're going to be paying it. How does that make you feel?
work harder, you lazy bastard.
Yeah, I mean, it's the young subsidizing the old, and the young are the poorest statistically in terms of net worth, while the elderly are the richest. So it doesn't really make much sense. And I mean, you can beat the returns Social Security pays by investing in AAA corporate bonds, which is the least impressive thing ever. So I really don't think there's much danger in private. Like, I don't understand how, if there's privatized Social Security, anyone would lose money over a 40 or 50-year period. I mean, Social Security pays basically in real terms what you put into it. So literally anything that pays more than 0% is going to beat Social Security.
Even that you're talking about even buying stocks over bonds over a 50-year period.
Yeah, anything really. I mean, stocks perform the best over long periods, but
I mean,
if
you're going to invest for a long period of time, stocks are the no-brainer.
Yeah, but if you need the money,
Right,
you
if
need
you're
money
Kevin,
10 years down the line, yeah, it's not a good
right.
idea.
If you're Kevin, you just invest in bonds. You know what I mean?
No, if you're Kevin, it's hedge funds, I believe.
Yeah. All right, so we've gotten to the segment of the show where we do our winners and the losers of the week. Julia, I don't know if you have winners and the losers of the week, if you want to make some up. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be politics. It could be sports. It could be whatever. Is there anything else that happens other than economics and politics? I don't know. But it can be anything. So
I'm going to say the winner of the week is Minnesota because we're the only state getting the new released Wheaties beer, like Wheaties the cereal, their beer.
Is it a Vice beer?
I don't know. I have to find out. I'm going to go find somewhere. It's on tap apparently around the cities.
Can you eat it with your Wheaties cereal? Like put it in your cereal and replace it with milk?
If you feel so adventurous, I suppose.
I already eat mine now with whiskey, so it's no big deal for me. Who are your losers?
Oh gosh. Wow. I guess I don't know. What?
So many to choose from.
there are. I guess.
We can come back. You don't have to pick. We'll go to Matt, who never has any, and it'll take him 20 minutes. Okay, we'll go to Matt. We'll go back to you. Go ahead, Matty.
My loser is myself, because I didn't think about the segment, even though I had a week to prepare for it.
Oh, you still don't know?
Oh, God,
I hate
no.
you. I hate you.
Too, Will.
All right, go, Kevin.
The winner of the week is Donald Trump because he's been going off about how we have to
Heads exploded everywhere. That anyone who's watching this will watch this.
Yeah, he's been going on about how we have to decouple from China, and he's been very isolationist in his talk about not having trade or free trade or anything like that. And all of a sudden, what happens this week? China implodes, and and you've got the stock market tanking at least for a couple days, and people started saying, "Well, Donald Trump was so prescient. Maybe he knows how to manage the economy." Blah blah blah. I mean, it was just dumb luck, frankly, and one thing has nothing to do with the other. So he definitely came out the dumb luck winner of the week.
I mean, that's where he's so wrong on China. They take our jobs. Well, no, it's our policy. It's that we have these high corporate tax rates. We have these confiscatory taxes that are driving businesses away from here. And hey, if China wants to manipulate their currency, we buy goods cheaper, then so be it. That's how the free market works. Let them institute bad policies, and why don't we win off of it? Let them subsidize our goods. So I don't know what he's talking about there.
Playing off that, I could make Donald Trump a loser. Kevin, did you mention Trump's ban or his protesting Nabisco? Did you mention that while I was gone for a second?
No.
Okay, because recently he was I guess Nabisco relocated to one of their factories to Mexico, and he decided to mention that during one of his campaign speeches, and he claimed that people should boycott them because they're sending American jobs to Mexico. But I don't think what he's realizing is that because of our tariffs, the price of sugar in America is twice what it would cost anywhere else in the world. So that's the reason they're moving, because sugar is their number one ingredient.
Right, but aren't we subsidizing sugar here too as well?
We're probably doing both because that's how government works.
Yeah, we also subsidize sugar imports.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Marco Rubio recently defended that a couple of weeks ago.
Our government funds all those like anti-smoking ads, and they also subsidize tobacco.
Yeah. So that's
how it works.
Welcome to the world. I just don't understand where Rubio gets on the grounds of subsidizing sugar. I don't understand that. Okay, Kevin, you're a loser.
What? What'd you say?
You have to put you're a loser.
Okay. No, the loser of the week is I thought long and hard about this, and I realized it's us, the Americans. I mean, this is the stupidest election that we've ever had. Take a look at our choices right now. You've got Donald Trump, who is the biggest idiot I think I've ever seen rise to the level of this much national attention on a political level, and then on the left you've got people want Bernie Sanders, a socialist. I mean, and it's between him and the biggest corporatist of all time, Hillary Clinton. What are we thinking? Seriously, this is an absolute ridiculous. The point that we've come to as a nation is striking, that we have these people as our choices for our next president.
Yeah. I would agree with you to a certain extent, but I don't really see much of a big difference between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, or the rest. Maybe Jim Webb I see a difference with, but not the rest of the field. So I don't know. I agree with you, but I think they're the same exact person. Okay, Julia, who's your loser?
My winner was Minnesota because of the Wheaties beer, but my loser is unfortunately also Minnesota because we are hosting a DNC meeting this week that all the contenders will be at.
Are you going to be there?
I will be, yep.
You think you'll get Hillary on?
I'm not sure. We're working on it.
She actually has linebackers that follow her around that hold a rope, and either they will knock you down or they will strangle you with that rope before you're able to answer her a single question. I mean, that's literally how it works. I don't know if they just keep the media so far from her because the woman is just, I don't know, she's on the brink of prison at this point, so it's hard to get anybody in there. But who else would you want to interview there? Bernie Sanders would probably do it.
Yeah, well, I want to interview them both. I'm kind of on a streak with interviewing candidates, so I'd like to say that I interviewed them all. But mostly I want to interview the people in attendance and ask them why they're supporters.
Right, that's a good one. That's pretty good. Where can people find easily your interviews and Alpha News? Is there a YouTube station? Is it Alpha News Facebook page?
Yeah, you can find us on Facebook under Alpha News or alphanewsmn.com.
Okay, alphanewsmn.com.
Mm-hmm.
And all your past episodes, are they the full-length episodes?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I have a winner and loser. My winner is Joe Biden because the time is perfect Joe Biden has trouble putting 3 syllables together, okay? But this guy is a shrewd politician. He knows how to say a bunch of things without saying anything. And he knows how to destroy people. He did it to Robert Bork. He's an overall good politician. I'm not saying I don't like him in any capacity, but you got to give a guy credit where credit is due. He destroyed Paul Ryan in 2012 in those debates. He's going to come in here and he's going to be a force to be reckoned with, and you're going to see a lot of Hillary supporters go towards Joe Biden. And if he can get Elizabeth Warren on that ticket, he's going to take away all Bernie Sanders support too. So it's a prudent strategy. My loser this week I wanted to do Planned Parenthood because of that new video, but that's just too easy. I'm going to go with academia. And Julia could probably relate to me on this one. In my political science classes, in one of them, they said Cuban refugees flee because or the Cuban refugees that flee Cuba are rich and conservative. Well, are conservative because they're rich, and that's why they left Cuba. That was the most interesting thing I've ever learned in academia before. Is that escaping a communist country that takes all of your stuff and murders people. You must be a rich conservative in order to do that. And I'm not kidding. I just slammed my head against the desk, and the teacher said, "Is there a problem?" And I said, "No, absolutely not. I just want an A." And I think he was confused. And then my other teacher today said that male and females, sexuality and genders are a construct, a social construct, and that there really is no difference between males and females. And I raised my hand and I said, "Yeah, I'm pregnant." And I don't think anybody understood what I was talking. Everybody just looked at me and said, "Yeah, I think I might be pregnant." And no one got it. So academia is clearly the largest loser when I see these kids just absorb this stuff rather than challenge it. It was amazing. I can't believe he said, that this idea that there's two genders is really this largely social construct. And I raised my hand and I said, could it be that there are two genders? Like everybody looks at me like I'm some sort of nut. Academia is my big loser. But I would really like to thank Julia for coming on. I really appreciate your time. Again, where can people find Alpha News?
Yeah, alphanewsmn.com, and we're on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. And if you want to find me on Twitter, it's @JuliaErynn. And thank you so much for having me on.
All right, and just search Alpha News on Facebook?
Yep.
Okay, and Kevin Ryan of Unbiased America. You can follow Unbiased America. We have Matt of Being Classically Liberal, also an admin at Unbiased America, and myself, the Analytical Conservative. Great page, by the way. And Unbiased America. And also, our website's out, so we're going to archive. Unbiasedamerica.com is out. We're adding more content to it. We're going to archive a lot of our posts there. Also, from We Are Capitalists is going to archive a lot of their posts there as well, so follow them. There's content up already, and we're looking for liberal writers that can somewhat speak eloquently about, I don't know, socialism. What do you think, Kevin?
Is there such a thing?
No. Anyway, thank you everybody for your time. Again, thank you, Julia. Have a great night. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week with the fella from the gun activist in Connecticut. And the following week will be, oh no, we have Tom Woods on the 3rd too, right?
Yep.
Okay, and then Wayne Allen Root will be the 16th. And we're moving along pretty nicely here, so stay tuned. Thank you.